You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
Birthdays stopped being exciting years ago. I used to look forward to them like a kid counting down to Christmas, but somewhere between the age of 30 and the messiness of married life, they started to feel more like performance reviews. Another year older, another checklist of things I hadn't quite accomplished. I wasn't expecting much when I woke up that morning, maybe pancakes, a kiss from Brooke, something small. Instead, I got something that lodged itself in my gut and refused to leave. I stepped out of the shower with the towel slung low on my waist and my robe draped over my arm. The bathroom mirror was still fogged up. I wiped it with the side of my hand and stared at my reflection for a second. I looked tired. Maybe I'd always looked tired lately. I couldn't tell anymore. Brooke had been asleep when I got up. At least, I thought she was. I tied my robe and headed downstairs, expecting the smell of coffee or maybe some low music playing on her phone. Instead, I heard voices low and muffled and the sound of the front door clicking open. I reached the bottom step just in time to see her. She was standing in the doorway, half in the frame of morning light, hugging someone. A tall guy in a black jacket, older than me, maybe mid-40s, with that clean, polished look that comes from either good genetics or good money. His arms were wrapped tight around her, not like a casual greeting, not like someone who barely knew her. It was longer than it should have been, slower than it needed to be. When they noticed me, they snapped apart like someone had hit a switch. The man turned, gave me a quick nod that said nothing, and stepped past me like I was a stranger. No smile. No handshake. Just walked out and pulled the door shut behind him. I looked at Brooke. She didn't flinch. That was the worst part. She just straightened her blouse and brushed her hair off her shoulder like nothing had happened. "That was Dean," she said, her voice light, too even. "From work. He stopped by to say congrats, I got the regional account. Remember? I told you I was up for it." I nodded slowly. She might have told me. Or maybe she hadn't. It was hard to tell these days. We talked, sure, but mostly in headlines and calendar reminders. Everything between us had become bullet-pointed. No subtext. No curiosity. Just logistics. I opened my mouth to say something, I don't even know what, but then I noticed her hands. She kept wringing them, one thumb circling the other. Brooke had never been the fidgeting type. She was always calm, composed, the person you wanted in the room when things fell apart. But now she wouldn't meet my eyes. And when I stepped closer to brush her shoulder, she flinched. Barely. But I saw it. "You okay?" I asked. She gave me a half-smile. "Of course. Just a busy morning, that's all." Then she walked into the kitchen without another word. I stood there for a second, still holding the doorknob like I could rewind time by just not letting go. I heard the sound of the coffee grinder, the clink of mugs. Everything was normal. That was the problem. It was too normal. Like she was performing normalcy. The rest of the day moved forward like clockwork. Family arrived around noon. Her parents first, her mom handing me a gift bag that was clearly picked out by Brooke. Her dad gave me that half-hug men do when they're not quite sure how close to be anymore. My sister brought a lemon cake, the one I'd loved since we were kids. Brooke smiled and passed out plates like nothing happened. She even made a toast, clinked her glass, said something about the most dependable man she's ever known, and kissed me on the cheek as people cheered. Her lipstick left a faint mark I didn't bother wiping off. It felt like part of the costume. I laughed at the right moments. Blew out candles. Opened gifts. But underneath it all, my brain was looping back to that hug, how long it lasted, how close their faces had been, how she never even said goodbye to him. He just walked away like it was understood. Like I was the intruder. At one point, while everyone was in the backyard, I stepped inside to grab more drinks and found her in the kitchen on her phone. She was facing away from me, typing fast. When she heard me come in, she locked the screen and slid it into her pocket without looking up. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The moment already said too much. Later, when the guests left and the house got quiet, I thought maybe we'd talk. I sat on the edge of the bed waiting for her to come in from brushing her teeth. I had rehearsed what I was going to say, something soft, not accusatory. Just a "Hey, are we okay?" Or maybe, "Was that guy really from work?" But when she came out, she didn't even pause. Just slipped under the covers, turned away from me, and said, "I'm wiped. Big day. Happy birthday, babe." Then silence. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after that. Thinking. Replaying things I hadn't wanted to replay in months. The strange trips. The sudden overnight work events. The way she kept her phone on silent now. I'd explained them away. Told myself she was stressed, that the distance between us was temporary. That every couple goes through it. But now, the weight of those doubts pressed harder. And still, I said nothing. I lay there in the dark next to my wife, a woman who had smiled, laughed, and played the part all day and felt more alone than I'd ever been in my life. The next morning, I woke up before Brooke. She was still on her side, back turned to me, just like the night before. I watched her breathe it slow, steady, peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in a while. There was a time I used to trace my fingers along the shape of her shoulder in the early morning light. That time felt like a lifetime ago. I didn't reach for her. Instead, I got dressed quietly and went downstairs, trying not to think too hard about anything, which of course only made everything louder in my head. Over coffee, I opened the blinds and stared out into the backyard, where a few paper streamers from the birthday party were still tangled in the bushes. Red, blue, gold. The colors looked ridiculous now, like confetti at a crime scene. My mind kept drifting back to the hug. That man's face. The way Brooke's voice had sounded when she said his name. Dean. From work. Congratulations. I kept rolling it around in my head like a loose tooth. At some point, I sat down with my phone and scrolled through her Instagram. Nothing new, nothing unusual. Then I checked her work account. Same thing. Everything neat, curated, untouched. Like our life was exactly what it had always been. But now I saw the photos differently. Her smile looked performative. Her captions were generic. And I realized I hadn't been in one of her posts in nearly 6 months. That's when the other memories started bubbling up, the ones I had been brushing off, chalking up to stress or coincidence or just the way things go after a decade of marriage. But now they came back with sharp edges and a bitter aftertaste. Like the night she said she had to fly out for a last-minute client meeting in Denver, but packed her new black dress instead of her usual travel clothes. I'd asked if she'd be out entertaining and she laughed, "Don't be paranoid." I remember that now. The way she said it. The way she didn't meet my eyes. Or the time I found a receipt for 2 glasses of wine and an appetizer, nothing crazy, but it was from a fancy lounge I knew neither of us liked. I asked about it and she shrugged it off. Client meeting ran late. And then there was the perfume. That was 3 months ago. I got in her car to move it out of the driveway and the smell hit me instantly. Not her usual scent. This was muskier, heavier, something I would have remembered. I thought maybe it belonged to a colleague or a spilled tester from Sephora. When I brought it up, she laughed and said I was being ridiculous. "Don't be dramatic, Adam," she'd said. "Do you want to check the trunk too?" I laughed along with her then. Tried to shrug it off. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband. The paranoid one. But looking back now, I see how expertly she disarmed me. It wasn't just the inconsistencies. It was how she had changed. Brooke used to be warm, not just physically, but emotionally. She used to pull me into her orbit with the smallest gesture. She used to laugh with me, not at me. But for months now, she'd been cold, like her smiles were stretched thin and her patience with me even thinner. I'd ask her to go on weekend trips and she'd say work was too crazy. I'd cook dinner and she'd be too full from lunch. I tried to get her to join me at the gym again, something we used to do together back when things felt simple, and she'd always have an excuse. Or worse, she'd pretend to agree and then bail last minute. When I brought it up, when I said I felt like we were drifting, she gave me a look like I was being needy. "We're fine, Adam," she said more than once. Not every week has to be some big romantic adventure. But it wasn't about romance. It was about presence. About feeling like I mattered. Lately, she looked right through me. Like I was part of the furniture, convenient, dependable, boring. She started nitpicking things too. Little jabs disguised as jokes. "Must be nice to have time for naps. Maybe you should let a professional do the yard this time. You know, you used to dress better when we were dating." I laughed them off at first. We both used sarcasm, it was part of our rhythm. But the tone had changed. She wasn't joking anymore. She was keeping score. I tried to hold us together. I thought it was a rough patch. I figured this is what happens in marriage. People get tired, life gets busy, you stop feeling seen. You have to lean in, not run away. I started doing little things, making her coffee in the mornings again, leaving her notes, suggesting we go out for dinner, just the two of us. She barely reacted. Once I booked a reservation at her favorite sushi place. I shaved, wore a blazer, tried to rekindle that spark. She spent most of the night texting under the table. Said it was work. I tried to believe her. But now I wondered if Dean was texting her that night. I couldn't stop thinking about that man. His face. The quiet way he exited. Like he'd been in our house before. Like he knew the layout. Later that afternoon, while Brooke was out getting groceries, I sat in her car again. Just sat there, engine off, doors locked, breathing in the air. The scent was still there. Faint now. But not hers. I checked the glove compartment. Just the manual, tissues, mints. Nothing suspicious. Then I noticed something tucked under the passenger seat, a small pack of gum. Not unusual. Except it was a brand neither of us chewed. Cinnamon something. I held it in my hand for a second, unsure what to feel. It wasn't evidence, but it wasn't nothing. I opened her center console. Receipts, charger cables, spare lip balm. But something caught my eye, a valet stub. Dated 2 weeks ago. From a hotel across town. I picked it up. She'd told me she'd worked late that day. That she'd been in back-to-back meetings. I remember because I'd ordered takeout and waited up till midnight, and when she came home she said she hadn't eaten. Said she was too tired. I looked up the hotel on my phone. It wasn't a conference venue. It wasn't near her office. It was boutique, modern, trendy, the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. I felt sick. Like the air inside the car had gone stale. When Brooke came home later, I watched her more closely. She unpacked the groceries, asked me about my day, kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't standing in the wreckage of a marriage she had slowly set fire to. I nodded along, played my part, but something inside me had shifted. My body was there, nodding, smiling, responding. But my brain had gone quiet. Still. Focused. She had pulled the thread. And now I was watching the whole thing unravel in slow motion. That night, Brooke was asleep before I even made it to bed. Or pretending to be, I couldn't tell anymore. I stood in the hallway for a long time, watching the soft rise and fall of the comforter, listening to the even sound of her breathing. I wanted to believe she was tired, that she had nothing to hide. But the stillness felt off. Like a curtain drawn too tight. I ended up on the couch again. I didn't even try to get under the blanket this time. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. It's weird when you're suspicious of someone, even the quietest things feel loud. The ticking of the thermostat, the hum of the fridge, the occasional buzz from her phone lighting up her nightstand upstairs. I heard it 3 times after she was supposedly asleep. I didn't sleep much. I didn't even try. The next morning I called in sick. First time in years. My boss didn't ask questions, he just told me to rest up. I lied and said it was a stomach bug. Which ironically wasn't far off. Brooke left around 9. She kissed me on the forehead, told me to feel better, and left in a black dress I hadn't seen in months. Not formal, but flattering. A little too flattering for a casual Friday at the office. I might stay at Rachel's tonight, she added casually while slipping her heels on. Girls' wellness retreat. You remember? I nodded. Yeah, I remembered. She'd mentioned it last week. A last-minute getaway with her yoga group, something about hot springs and journaling. I didn't question it then. I should have. Sure, I said, playing it cool. Have fun. She smiled. You'll survive one night without me? I almost said something. Something sharp. Something honest. But I just gave a tight smile and said, guess I'll find out. The moment she left, I stood at the window and watched her drive away. Waited exactly 1 minute. Then I went out to the garage. I hadn't touched the camera in a while. The one I'd installed above the garage door when our bikes got stolen 2 years ago. It wasn't connected to any cloud storage. Just recorded to an SD card. I hadn't checked it in months, maybe longer. But suddenly, it felt like the most important piece of truth I had. I opened the cabinet where I kept the tools and rummaged until I found the plastic case with the spare cards. Slid the current one out of the camera and popped it into my laptop. It had been recording the last week in short loops, a few seconds every time it detected movement. Took a while to find what I was looking for. There was a clip from earlier that morning. Brooke pulling out of the driveway. Then nothing for hours. Then, there. Timestamp. 1:08 a.m. The night before. I clicked on the file, heart pounding. The footage was grainy. Garage lighting's never great, but clear enough. I saw Brooke's car pull in. Then the driver's door opened. She stepped out. And so did someone else. The man from my birthday morning. Dean. He stepped out casually like he belonged there. Like this wasn't his first time. They didn't say much, at least not that I could hear. But I saw the way she leaned into him, the way his hand grazed the small of her back. They walked up the path side by side. Not in a rush. Not sneaking. Just comfortable. The front door opened. They went inside. The porch light turned off. 10 minutes later, the house went dark. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the frozen frame of them entering our home. Our home. Together. My hands clenched into fists without me realizing. My jaw hurt from how tight I was grinding my teeth. It was like someone took a match and dropped it into the fuel tank of every doubt I tried to suppress. All the late nights, the weird excuses, the coldness, the sarcasm, the flinches. It all made sense now. She wasn't just pulling away. She was pulling toward someone else. For a long time, I didn't feel anything. No screaming, no punching walls, no dramatic breakdown. Just this strange, hollow quiet, like I'd stepped out of my own life and was watching it from across the room. I replayed the video. Once, twice, 3 times. Every time, hoping I had misread something. Platonic gesture. A harmless visit. But the body language said otherwise. The familiarity. The ease. The timing. She hadn't just brought him into our house. She had brought him in at 1 in the morning, after lying to my face about where she was. She had kissed me goodbye the next morning like nothing had happened. Eventually, I closed the laptop and just sat there with my head in my hands. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Time stopped matching. I didn't eat, didn't shower, didn't turn on the TV. The only thing I did, the only thing that made any sense, was pack a bag. I didn't rage. I didn't write a dramatic note. I didn't text her or call her or tell her what I knew. I just moved through the house like a ghost, pulling a few shirts, some jeans, my toothbrush, my charger. I didn't know where I was going exactly, just that I couldn't stay here another night. Not under this roof. Not in this lie. I left the house without a sound. The last thing I saw before I shut the door behind me was the photo on the entryway table. The 2 of us on our honeymoon, smiling on a beach in Maui, arms wrapped around each other like we had the world figured out. I didn't take it with me, didn't smash it either. I just left it right there. Let her see it when she got back. Let her wonder what I knew, when I knew it, and how far I was willing to let this go before I decided to disappear. The drive was quiet. I turned off the music, left my phone on airplane mode. The GPS led me to the only place I could think of, Caleb's cabin. He was an old friend from college, divorced last year, bought himself a quiet little place 2 hours outside the city. We hadn't talked much lately, but when I texted him just one line, "You around?" he replied instantly. Doors open. No questions. When I arrived, he handed me a beer, said nothing, and pointed toward the spare room. That was it. No interrogation. No forced sympathy. Just space. And silence. Exactly what I needed. I sat on the porch with him that night, watching the sky go from dusk to stars. He finally spoke. She cheat. I nodded slowly. Figured. And then we went back to watching the sky. The first morning at Caleb's cabin hit different. I woke up to the sound of wind sliding through pine trees and the low hum of something boiling on the stove, probably coffee. There was no beeping from my phone, no early email pings, no Brooke clattering around in the kitchen while FaceTiming someone from work. Just stillness. Pure and unfamiliar. I sat up slowly on the creaky mattress, my body stiff from a night on a spare bed that wasn't made for long-term guests. The air smelled like pine, wood, and something faintly burnt. I opened the window and breathed deep, letting it settle in my chest. There was a kind of peace in that discomfort. A raw, stripped-down calm I didn't know I needed until I was away from everything. From her. From the house. From the web of excuses and forced smiles. Caleb was already on the porch, his flannel shirt hanging open over a thermal, his coffee steaming in a chipped black mug. He didn't say anything when I stepped out, just nodded toward the extra chair and slid over the second mug. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the trees sway and a couple of squirrels chase each other across the deck railing. "You gonna tell me what happened?" he asked eventually, not turning to look at me. I sipped the coffee. It was terrible. Strong and bitter, and probably made from grounds he'd reused out of laziness. I didn't care. "She brought someone into the house," I said, my voice flat. "Told me she was going to a wellness retreat. Came home at 1 a.m. with another man. The same guy I caught her hugging on my birthday." Caleb didn't react. Didn't blink. Just nodded, slow and deliberate. "Damn," he said finally. "Yeah." He rubbed his jaw like he was trying to decide how much to say. "You planning on confronting her?" "No," I said. "I already saw what I needed to see. Figured. That why you're here?" That, and I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. He nodded again. "Welcome to the club." That was the end of that conversation. We didn't talk about her again that day. Instead, we chopped wood. Literally. Caleb had a pile out back that he'd been avoiding for months. He handed me an axe and said, "Take it out on these." So I did. 4 hours. With every swing, I pictured the look on Brooke's face when she lied to me. Her soft tone, the little head tilt she used when she wanted to downplay something. The babe, you're overthinking this, we *p***nized into a soothing whisper. Thwack. I thought about all the ways she'd made me second-guess myself. Thwack. About the way she started turning compliments into critiques. Thwack. The late nights. The secrecy. The man in the garage. Thwack. 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 By sunset I was sore, blistered, and more clear-headed than I'd been in months. That night, I sat on the back porch alone, wrapped in a blanket, nursing a cold beer while Caleb snored inside. I scrolled through my phone, the texts, the photos, the entire digital record of a marriage that now felt like someone else's. There were the anniversary pics she'd posted with captions like, "My rock," "My constant," liked by hundreds, commented on by friends who had no idea they were congratulating a lie. And then there were the things she hadn't posted, the silent dinners, the turned backs in bed, the way she flinched when I tried to hold her hand in public. I started typing a message to her, then deleted it. I thought about calling her, then didn't. I changed my voicemail greeting to something neutral and turned off all notifications. It wasn't that I didn't want closure. I just didn't want it from her anymore. She'd already said everything she needed to say, not in words, but in actions. Actions speak louder. I used to think that was just a saying. Now I understood it differently. Her hug with that man? That was louder than any excuse she could give me. Letting him walk into our home? That was her manifesto. The next day, I went for a long walk through the woods behind the cabin. I didn't take my phone. Didn't need GPS. Just followed the trail until I couldn't see the house anymore. There's something about being alone in the middle of nowhere that makes your brain settle into a rhythm. The noise fades. Your inner voice gets clearer. Not softer, just more honest. And mine was saying, "You've been in denial for a long time." I had known, on some level, for months. Maybe longer. Not the specifics, but the truth underneath. That I wasn't being loved the way I deserved to be. That I wasn't living in a partnership anymore. That she had already emotionally left. And the worst part? I'd accepted it. I made excuses for her mood swings. Blamed her job. Blamed myself. Told myself to hang in there. Told myself good marriages hit rough patches. That if I worked harder, gave more, stayed loyal, she'd come back around. But she didn't, because she wasn't lost. She was already gone. I found a fallen log and sat down, staring at the sky through the trees. I stayed there for a while, just breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't punch anything. I just accepted it. My marriage was over. It had been over long before I watched her walk in with that man. That was just the final page. The ink drying. The drive back to the cabin felt lighter somehow. Not happy. Not resolved. Just honest. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want some dramatic confrontation. I didn't want to expose her or blast the truth across our mutual friends. I just wanted out. That night, I sat across from Caleb eating reheated chili and cornbread and said, "I think I'm done." He raised an eyebrow. Done as in, done? I nodded. I can't fix something that never stopped breaking. He didn't offer advice. He didn't give me a pep talk. He just said, "Then it's time." He handed me a beer and changed the subject. And just like that, I had made the quietest, most important decision of my life. 2 days later, I packed up and headed back to the city. Brooke still hadn't messaged me. Not once. Not "Where are you?" Not "Are you okay?" Not "Can we talk?" I'm not sure what's worse, the betrayal or the silence that follows it. Like she was relieved I was gone. When I got back to the house, I didn't go inside. I just stood on the sidewalk and stared at it. The place we had spent nearly a decade building a life in. The porch we painted together. The kitchen we fought over backsplash tiles for. The hallway where I once hung fairy lights just to surprise her after a long day. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum exhibit I didn't belong in. I got back in my car and drove to a hotel. That night, I booked an appointment with a lawyer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I was finally ready to protect myself. To stop waiting for the version of Brooke I had fallen in love with to walk back through the door. Because she wasn't coming. I stayed at that hotel longer than I'd planned. It was the kind of place designed for business travelers, neat, colorless, forgettable. Beige walls, slightly stiff pillows, the hum of a mini fridge that never quite shuts up. But it was quiet, clean, safe, and most importantly, it didn't smell like her shampoo. There were no framed wedding photos on the walls, no coffee mugs with his and hers printed in cursive, no grooves in the mattress shaped like two people growing apart. The silence was my shelter. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I wasn't ready to be consoled, or questioned, or pitted. I shut off social media, ignored texts, let calls ring out. The only person who knew I was alive was Caleb, and even he had the decency not to check in every hour. The weirdest part was how time moved differently. Without Brooke around, without the daily cycle of pretending everything was fine, my days slowed down. I'd wake up whenever I felt like it. Sometimes 11, sometimes 7. No alarm. I'd eat when I was hungry and skip meals when I wasn't. I watched TV without guilt. Read old books I hadn't touched in years. Walked aimlessly through the city with headphones on and no destination. And still, every night, that same ache came back. Not just heartbreak. Not just betrayal. Grief. Like mourning the death of someone still alive. That version of Brooke, the one who used to send me good luck texts before meetings, who used to laugh at my stupid impressions, who used to fall asleep on my chest mid-movie, that Brooke was gone. And the woman who had taken her place? I didn't know her. I wasn't sure I wanted to. 3 days into my hotel exile, I was sitting by the window with lukewarm coffee in my hand when my phone buzzed. A single message. Taylor, hey. I heard. I'm so sorry. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Brooke's younger sister. We weren't close, not exactly, but there had always been an easy familiarity between us. She was 5 years younger, sharp-tongued and observant. The kind of person who could cut you down and build you up in the same sentence. Brooke always said Taylor lacked a filter, but I'd always appreciated her honesty. We hadn't spoken much in the last year. A few comments on family photos. A short conversation at her dad's retirement party. That was it. But there she was reaching out. I typed and deleted 3 different replies before settling on the truth. Me, yeah. It's a mess. Her response came fast. Taylor, I figured something was wrong. You okay? I didn't know how to answer that. I wasn't okay. But I also wasn't crumbling. Not anymore. Just floating in some weird in-between state. Hurt but numb. Aware but detached. Me, not really. But I'm getting there. There was a pause. Then another message. Taylor, want to grab coffee? No pressure. No therapy. Just a quiet spot and caffeine. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to see anyone. Not yet. Not when everything still felt raw and uncertain. But something about her message, how simple it was, how unintrusive, cut through the fog. She wasn't prying. Wasn't offering advice or asking for the whole story. Just a seat across from me. Me, sure. Tomorrow? Taylor, there's this little cafe downtown. Vellum books. Coffee, books, and good croissants. Noon? I agreed. Then sat there staring at our text thread, wondering when the last time was that I'd felt safe talking to someone without putting on an emotional costume. Vellum Books was tucked between an antique shop and a florist. I'd walked by it 100 times but never noticed it. The windows were tall and dusty, filled with paperback displays and handwritten recommendations. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and old pages. Taylor was already there when I arrived. She stood when she saw me, pulling off a mustard yellow beanie and giving me a small, cautious smile. Hey, stranger. I nodded. Hey. She gestured to the table by the window, 2 cups already waiting. I figured you'd want a black coffee, she said. No room for cream. Am I still right? Still right. We sat. For a while, neither of us said much. We sipped. Watched people pass by. The cafe was quiet, just a few students hunched over laptops and a man reading a worn copy of Dune by the fireplace. She broke the silence first. You don't have to talk about her, she said. We can talk about literally anything else. Aliens. Parking tickets. The downfall of Twitter. Whatever. I smiled despite myself. Appreciate that. She looked at me for a moment, then softened. But if you do want to talk about it, I'm here. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even know where to start. She lied to me, I said finally. Repeatedly. For months. And the worst part is, I let her. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was the problem. Taylor's expression didn't change. She just nodded slowly. Brooke's always been good at compartmentalizing, she said carefully. She can be someone different depending on who she's around. It used to drive our mom nuts. I raised an eyebrow. You think she planned this? Or just fell into it? Taylor shrugged. I think she stopped choosing you a long time ago. But instead of walking away, she wanted both. The stability and the escape. That hit harder than I expected. Guess I was the stability, I said. She met my eyes. You were the person who showed up. Who kept showing up. That matters. Don't let her screw up how you see yourself. I looked down at my cup, unsure of what to say. Her words didn't erase the pain, but they did something else, something smaller, but just as important. They grounded me. Like I was a little less crazy for feeling what I felt. We sat there for over an hour, drifting from topic to topic. Music. Childhood stories. She told me about a disastrous date she went on where the guy brought his mom to the restaurant as a surprise. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. When it was time to go, she stood and pulled on her coat. You don't have to go through this alone, she said. Even if you just need to sit in silence and sip coffee with someone who gets it. I nodded. Thanks, Taylor. As she walked out, she turned back and added, by the way, you look better without the tie. Just saying. I watched her disappear into the crowd and realized something strange. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel measured. I didn't feel judged. I just felt seen. And it wasn't romantic. It wasn't complicated. It was just human. Kind. Real. A reminder that not everyone in my life wore a mask. Back at the hotel that evening, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, playing the conversation over in my head. Not dissecting it. Not analyzing every word. Just remembering how it felt. I didn't have answers yet. Didn't have a plan. But I had a voice in my life again, one that didn't echo Brooks or twist like hers did when she lied. A voice that didn't ask me to be less or quieter or tougher. A familiar voice that simply said, you matter. And in this new space of silence and rebuilding, that felt like enough.